Well, there you go. Let's bring in our panel. Kerry-Anne Walsh, Fiona Scott, Claire March. Good to see you all. Let's just start on that, Kerry-Anne. Who could you possibly be talking about there?
I have no idea.
Wow.
Wouldn't be somebody that was on one of the commercials this morning.
And when you say crapping on about who gets the credit, well, you know, Barnaby last week was really worked up about we need more credit.
He was crapping on, he was. And this morning it took him a number of responses to questions, very pointed, point-blank questions about the leadership of the National Party. It took 4 or 5 goes for him to say, yes, of course, the leadership's all good. We don't talk about ourselves. We're talking about the people out in the bush, at which everybody watching fell about laughing and choked on their Wheaties.
Michael McCormack here looks a bit more fired up, doesn't he?
Well, look, you know, that was a pretty good performance. It's you know.
I mean, he's right. Farmers don't care who's taking the credit.
Farmers don't care. I mean, when they're milking the cows or they're out there surveying yet another dry day after 7 years of drought, they're not sitting inside watching Sunrise or whatever program it is, are they?
The Nationals deserve more credit.
Yes, gee, the Nationals deserve more credit.
Scott Morrison's taking too much of the running on this. Fiona, what's your read on the dynamic there right now in the National Party?
Yeah, look, my read of talking to the Nats is that Michael McCormack's leadership is pretty rock solid at the moment. He performed well in the last election. The Nats did quite well, and that's it. End of story. And you know, the whole crapping on incident of saying people making comments here, there, and everywhere. I mean,
that's what it will forever be known as now, right?
It was the crapping on. Like, I don't know. Anyway, but look, it was like, let's be fair, it was a pretty random interview this morning, and it just seemed to go around in circles of saying nothing, you know. And I don't think it's a fair reflection of my conversations with many Nats down there in Capitol Hill over the last couple of weeks, whilst Parliament's been sitting. So it kind of really comes out of nowhere. But at the moment, David, William McCormack is 100% right. You know, farmers are shooting themselves because of the fact that their properties are in such dire spaces. When we have the NFF come out and say we need to start paying people to get off the land because of climate change and other reasons, then, you know, there's big issues going on here where people are losing their lives, their livelihoods and the future of their families. And right now, the government, whether it's a National, a Liberal, a Shooters here in New South Wales, I don't care who you are, we need to come up with a solution. We need to come up with solutions right now, but we also need to sit there and go back to Dorothy McKellar's poem. We are a land of droughts and flooding rains. We know droughts are going to happen. We know floods are going to happen. We need to prepare right now for the water security going into the next drought when that inevitably happens.
Let's move on because, look, there will be more focus on the drought, more announcements on the drought. The Prime Minister's made that clear again today. I want to talk about the GST, though. There won't be any more announcements anytime soon, it seems, from the Prime Minister on the GST. Claire, as I said earlier, Dean Smith, the Liberal Senator's backing in the idea of broadening the base to food, fresh food, private school fees, health and so on, or increasing the rate. It's not the first time this has come up. New South Wales, the government there right now is trying to get a debate going on. What do you think about the idea in itself? Is it something we should be looking at?
Well, look, I think for a fair cohort of people in this public policy space still see the GST as a little bit of unfinished business. I mean, there is a lot that the GST has given us as a country as a broad-based consumption tax, but it seems to come up every so often, and indeed, you know, most recently before this, of course, it came up under the current Prime Minister's tenure as Treasurer when it was briefly floated under his role and very quickly shut down by the then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. I think in the most meaningful way it's been raised was under the Prime Minister Abbott when he launched concurrent white papers into both our tax system and federation. And they are intrinsically linked in this country, and just how we resolve our issue that the states don't have as much revenue-raising powers, but they bear the brunt of all of the spending responsibilities.
And it's notable, that's a good point, because, Claire, it is notable the states, particularly the big ones, keep driving this. I mean, before Dominic Perrottet in New South Wales, Mike Baird as Premier, together with Jay Weatherall, it was, in South Australia, went a long way down the path of putting forward a case as to why we need to do something about the GST.
Yeah, and I think I think what Gladys Berejiklian, the current Premier of New South Wales, is floating is an inquiry to look at ways that it could be worthy of exploration, because indeed Treasury have looked at it in a contemporary setting, and there have been some blocker factors to this, including that the compensation alone to low-income earners and those on government welfare benefits might be so large that the possible gains...
And that's Scott Morrison's argument, today. As it was when they ditched it. He said, look, Treasury looked at it, it's a money churn, you've got to compensate a lot of people and you end up with not much.
And you end up with not much coin at the end of it.
Those state taxes, Kerry-Anne, payroll tax, stamp duties,
precisely.
They're inefficient.
They're inefficient, and apart from anything else, you know, the Federation has a huge number of problems. The duplication of services, the duplication over monetary issues. It costs the Australian economy across the nation billions. There's been successive parliamentary committees that have looked at this and looked at how we can do something to get all our systems in line, including taxation matters.
It's hard, isn't it?
And it's just, you know...
If you had a blank sheet of paper, if you started from scratch, you probably would have the GST apply to across the board.
Yeah, that's right.
As Howard and Costello tried originally to do.
Well, and it was floated back at the tax summit by Paul Keating and swiftly knocked on the head. That was in 1985 by Paul Keating.
Goes right back,
And in fact, yes, and it went back to Gorton's time. It was floated and knocked on the head in Gorton's time. So at some stage, Australia is going to have to bite the bullet and look at the broad-based consumption tax and the way the states operate vis-a-vis the...
Well, that gets the
Commonwealth.
I mean, yes, it's got to stack up. It's got to show that it's going to do something for the economy. But, Fiona, is there also a bit of political timidity here when it comes to touching the GST at all?
Look, David, Kerry-Anne and Claire have both raised some excellent examples historically where the GST has been the ultimate poison chalice. I mean, John Howard managed to get it through, but only with the help of Meg Lees and the Democrats at that period of time. And the whole rationale that was sold to the Australian public was exactly around this issue of payroll tax and stamp duties. Now, the fact is that when it was negotiated, the Democrats made sure those things stayed in. We got the GST, but it didn't necessarily fix the issues that it was actually going towards. In fact, it just resolved things like the 22% sales taxes. Now, the issue here, I think it is something that we need to genuinely have a conversation about, but as soon as somebody raises it, it becomes this hot potato political issue. And it means that we don't actually progress what it is. We don't actually progress the fact that we have the second most complicated, behind the United States, tax system in the world. Now, to have such a complicated tax system makes it hideously expensive for small businesses, medium businesses, large-scale businesses to be able to administer this stuff. I mean, we've had the ATO come out recently saying that the Australian public doesn't really know what we do or how we interact. Well, it's very hard on the ATO when they have to administer these very complicated taxes. And I think it's one of those things when we do look at the productivity, we do look at red tape removal from our country, the GST really does have to sit front and centre. You know, it's great that Dean Smith raised it today, but at the same token, when the Prime Minister did look at this, when he was the Treasurer with Malcolm Turnbull, there was a raft of reasons why it just couldn't proceed. And you know what? That is to the detriment of all Australians.
Do you think, though, Fiona, just quickly on this before we move on, there is any window of possibility that they take something to the next election when it comes to the GST?
Look, as a pure economist, I would love to see a streamlining of our tax system that includes the GST, but as a political pragmatist, I just can't see either political party wanting to take this on or provide meaningful reform here because, you know what, it's just too hard.
Especially after last election.
I want to turn to Labor.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Claire.
Especially after Labor's lesson at the last election. I mean,
that's true.
The idea that tax policy is going to go to a general election anytime soon is unfortunately for those of us who want to see tax reform, just seems like it's in the never.
Let's just touch on Labor here. Anthony Albanese will give his first vision speech or headland speech tomorrow. These have a long storied history, and this one will be about jobs, you're right. But from what hints he gave us today, he's talking about things like lithium. We mine the stuff, we send it overseas and we buy back the batteries. Why don't we have the sort of value-added processing and so on here? Makes sense. Everyone would say, sure.
Yep.
But, you know, how does government get that to happen?
Oh, I don't know how government gets that to happen.
Particularly when, you know, there's a lot of cheap processing going on probably in places like China.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think Anthony Albanese's got a lot more challenges on his hands at the moment than looking at, you know, lithium issues. I think it's all around, you know, books that are coming out saying that they've lost touch with the traditional working class, and I don't really know what that means. I think that's fairly simplistic to look at elections in that sort of easy way, the way we did when Paul Keating lost the election back in '96 and put it down to the blue collar vote. But I think you know, the talk or the chatter around Albanese's leadership, give the bloke a chance. You know, he has only been in the job not very long,
less than 6 months, in a tough time.
You know, in a tough time. And
do you think he needs to give a bit more substance, though? I mean,
well, of course he does, but I mean, we haven't seen the policy review results.
But does he have to wait for that? And should he
of course.
relying on what Craig Emerson and Jay Weatherall suggest he should do?
Well, I think the party's waiting for those results, and until such time as the party and the party's followers see those results, it's very hard to get him to start. So how could he possibly, as he says he wants to be seen as a Labor leader, not an opposition leader, go sprouting ideas of his own without listening to what the party has to say about the last result and getting feedback from his flock?
Claire, this question about losing the working class and trying to win it back. I mean, Kerry-Ann's right, that's perhaps a little simplistic, but when you do look at where the swings were the worst for Labor, it was in, you know, parts of Western Sydney, out of suburbans, and Queensland, WA, absolutely. What can Labor do to get those voters back?
Well, I think, look, from a starting point, we need to recognise that both the major parties are losing votes to the minor parties. It's a problem that is happening globally, not just here in Australia. And, you know, much is said about Labor's loss at the recent election, but not a lot of recognition is given to the fact that the Liberal Party didn't have a great election either, insofar as primary swings towards it. You know, it suffers from the same sort of structural issues from a primary vote swing point of view, at least, that we did last election. But look, I think when it comes to this sort of self-loathing that one does post-election, we mustn't lose sight of that. The Labor Party has a terrific sense of purpose around its working class roots, around its union ties and the union movement more broadly. It's that competitive edge that's made us the oldest political party in Australia, with a united sense of who we represent and just what our values are. I think, you know, there's so much there to take stock of in the positive before we get too reformist about changing basically our core being setting. I think
don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think you're referring to Nick Drynforth's upcoming book, where he calls for quotas from working class people to be included, I guess, more so in the democratic process. Look, it's never a set and forget. Look, we ran a terrible campaign in the sense that we, you know, our campaign structure and our cell, the more professional, I guess you would argue, part of our campaign wasn't right. I don't know how quotas is going to deal with that. If anything, perhaps a little
I'm going to talk
more,
to him more about that later in the week anyway. Look, it's an interesting idea, but it's not one everyone's jumping on. Look, Fiona, we're nearly out of time, but just quickly to you. I mean, reconnecting with the working class, you know, we've heard this before. Labor's struggle to try and, you know, juggle its constituencies. What do you think?
Look, I think this is a very important speech for Anthony Albanese to set the agenda and to lead Labor ahead. I agree with the comments of both the ladies, and I think for Albanese, it is a very difficult time for the Labor Party because they did lose what they thought was the unlosable election. It takes soul searching to understand where they have lost faith with their base and how they can reconnect. And I think in all good intentions, I think we really do have to give Anthony Albanese a bit of the benefit of the doubt to try and navigate through that, and I think give him his head, so to speak, so that he can, you know, start to outline his vision. We will see. We'll have that covered for you tomorrow afternoon. Now, the three of you will
I'm sure, be here next week. I won't. This is our last chat together, so can I thank you? I know. Can I thank you all for your contributions?
It's
It's been a
pleasure.
great panel. Love talking to you all each Monday afternoon. So thank you all. Fiona, Claire, Kerry-Ann, stay in touch.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. I'll be back talking to the Shadow Treasurer, Jim Chalmers. Stay with us.